Okay, guys, so it's the next day. I got some good sleep last night. One of the issues here is with this radiator hose, the water pump is actually quite a bit lower than our receptacle here, and it takes basically it comes out of here and basically takes a 90-degree turn, but it also has to go down and then it has to go back up to the pump. So I went to AutoZone and sifted through their hoses, and after taking some measurements and tried to find something that would work here, well, that was a complete waste of time. So here's what I did. This is what they call a flex hose kit. Now the other issue is the water pump outlet is really big. I mean, it's like 2 inches in diameter, and then on my radiator where the hose needs to go, it's like less than an inch and a half. So there's a big difference here. So what this kit is good for is, number one, it has this flex hose, and this stuff is like really flexible. So I mean, you can get all kinds of really tight bends out of this thing, and it's never going to leak. I've used them before. And then they give you a bunch of rubber adapters. They're all pressed in there now, but these come out, and there's multiple adapters here, so you can adapt up to the water pump size or down to the radiator size. This is actually smaller than I need for either one of those, so I'm going to start taking those out. And then of course these just go on the end of the hoses like this. And also you can cut this if it's too long. I'm obviously going to have to cut this because it's way too long for what I'm doing. But this is the answer when you have a really tight situation. This stuff here, it is a little bit pricey. This kit was like 70 bucks, but I mean, I've had real good luck with them, and you really don't have much of a choice in tight spaces. You kind of have to use something like this. So I'll get that on, and once I figure this out and get that on there, I'll show you what it looks like. So this is the rubber sleeve that came out of here, and inside that rubber sleeve there's 2 different size inserts here. This is for a really small receptacle, so if we try to put this on here, it's just way too thick. It doesn't fit. So that's obviously not the right one. This other one slides right over and it fits perfectly on there. So that's the sleeve that we want. So what you do, the side that goes on the radiator, when you figure out the sleeve that you want, you just kind of fit that back down in there. And then this piece without either one of the sleeves in it is what goes over your hose here. So once you get that in, you just fit your hose in there like that. We got our sleeve in here, and then this guy just goes over the top of both of those, and then you tighten on the radiator and you tighten your clamp. It actually works really well. It's a very effective. And then of course on the other end we got a large, the water pump receptacle is large, so we're probably not going to use an insert in there at all. This insert, this outer rubber piece without an insert in it, will go on a standard small block Chevrolet water pump. So that's kind of how that works. Okay, so there it is, guys. You can see the way that hose is bent. It would have been very difficult to actually find a rubber hose in that shape. So, but man, this stuff is fantastic. It makes really tight turns without crimping, and you can always put these on so the clamps are down and they're not showing. You see how the clamps are up, and then you get this clean look here. When you get to be my age, you're more concerned about not having to climb under the truck, to be honest with you, than you are making that look perfect. So I want access to those clamps. I'm not worried about that, but it's on there. It's functional. Now we can get coolant in this thing and make sure it doesn't leak. I don't totally like the way this top hose came out. I mean, it's okay. I may get another one of these and do that with the top hose. I haven't decided yet. I probably will at some point, but for now it'll function. That'll work just to get this thing going. So, all right. We're moving on to the last parts of this list here. So a man in a brown truck wearing a brown uniform just brought me a brown box full of some silver parts. Alright, so these are the swap headers. Literally just showed up. Now, one of the things that I would recommend here, so once you go to a jet hot or a coated type header like this here, and it has this real nice shiny silvery color, and you can see if you look inside, that coating is not only on the outside but it's on the inside. There's a lot of tests on the internet, and I did my own test quite a few years ago with a set of these. Temperature wise, I had just some standard steel headers, and I warmed the engine up and I took the temperature under the hood, and it was like 700-800 degrees. These headers, when I swapped to them and I took a temperature reading, they reduced the underhood temperature like by 70%. It was ridiculous. In fact, these types of headers usually about, I don't know, less than 10 minutes after you shut the engine off, you can grab this pipe and it's not too hot to touch. So these things reduce the underhood temperature like crazy. It's the only kind of header I would even consider putting on. Now, the drawback is they are a lot more expensive than traditional type headers. These were like $400, where stock swap, the steel swap headers that are similar to this without the coating are like $160. So yeah, they are expensive, but worth every penny, trust me. So I'm jazzed now. This is my project for tonight. I was gonna get these babies on. We're getting closer. Now I'm anxiously waiting at the door for the man in brown to bring me a fuel regulator. Alright, so I'm gonna get these on. Okay, so installation of the headers. I've got some tips for you. I mean, you can do this however you want, but I would recommend doing it the way that I'm going to tell you, because some of the stuff I'm going to talk about right now I learned by not doing this. I learned it the hard way. Number one, before you put the header on this thing, put your spark plugs in and torque them. Gap them, make sure they're in and ready to go. That's going to save you a ton of trouble. This is pretty tight when it comes to plugs. Now down the road, if you got to change your plug, you're really probably not going to pull the headers. You don't have a choice, but initially, yeah. The second thing is, if you look down there at the starter, I'll try to zoom in on that guy. So you'll notice that my solenoid wire that goes to ignition to actuate the solenoid and my battery cable, my positive battery cable, are running down underneath this motor mount. Listen, take my advice. Run those wires under this motor mount and come up around this way. The thing is, I know that they don't do that on the full-size Chevys, but on this tight engine bay, what I've learned is you have got to get this wiring away from those headers. So it's a longer run of wire, so I'm coming out. And also, if you look at this small wire for the solenoid, the ignition wire, make sure what I've done is I've double wrapped that thing with that plastic insulation and taped it. And then I run it down underneath this motor mount, and I'm coming out over here. Here's the rest of the wire. I'm probably going to insulate this too. But if you'll notice, this is coming out from underneath the motor mount. And also my power wire for my battery right here. There's my power wire. That is my main battery cable coming out from underneath there. So I've run it underneath that motor mount. You have got to get the stuff away from that header on this tight engine bay. Otherwise, trust me, you're going to fry stuff. So that's my recommendation. Now that you've got that done, oh, another thing. So I've got these gaskets. So your gasket set comes with just the stock type gasket set comes with these gaskets. Do not use these gaskets for a header. These are not header gaskets. These are exhaust manifold gaskets, and if you use these with a header, they're only going to last you like a month and they're going to blow out. Headers have got to have an actual header gasket. They look like this. This one's made by Mr. Gasket. So it's usually a one-piece deal. You're going to have a lot of frustration. I saw a video on YouTube the other day where a guy was changing his header gaskets and he was using these, and he was like, man, I don't understand. This is the third set of gaskets I've had to keep blowing out. Maybe I think my headers are warped or something. No, those are not for headers. They will not work. So they'll work temporarily, but you're going to blow them. So make sure you get header gaskets. If you want, you can actually seal these up with the right stuff. I know a lot of people balk at that, but there's a lot of real high-end hot rod shops that do that and their headers never leak. The HTC, the coated headers don't usually leak anyway. I mean, they're pretty good. That's one nice thing about these is they reduce the heat like 70%. And also, they hardly ever leak. These things are great for not leaking. And one other thing is when you put your bolts in for your headers, always put some Loctite on the threads on these header bolts. So Loctite them in, get the gasket on there, and everything will be fine. Now on the other side, the header tube on this side actually loops around that steering shaft right there. So you got to take the steering shaft off of the steering box, which is not a big deal, and you have to loop that second header pipe around that steering. I'll show you what it looks like once I get it on there, but just remember you're going to have to disconnect your steering shaft to get this header on the driver's side. One nice thing about the swap headers, this is the passenger side. The driver's side's a little harder, but if you'll notice now that I've got everything prepared, this thing fits right in there with no trouble at all. I mean, it's got room, it works. So putting these on as a snap, I think I actually would have had a harder time with the manifolds I was trying to use. So swap headers, highly recommended. Okay guys, so here's the deal. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This header on the driver's side is a real booger to put on. So it's really close to the brake lines. I got those ironed out and out of the way pretty much. The conclusion that I've come to is this header is just not going to work with that shift linkage there. I mean, I've tried every which way I can think of. I've been farting around with this for an hour. And that shift linkage for the column shifter is literally in the way. It is, I mean, I've bent that thing back as far as I can and tweaked it and lengthened the rod and everything else, and you can see where it's sitting right there. It literally is covering the rear header bolt, and not only that, where the shift arm goes down to the transmission, right where the collector for that header needs to be, right down in there, you can see that's where the shift arm is. And I can't even get the header to come up to where it's supposed to be to get the bolts started. And even if I could get them started, the shift arm's in the way of that rear bolt. So I've come to the conclusion that I'm just going to take the shift arm out and buy a floor shifter. I'm just going to buy one of the cable driven shifters. They're only a couple $100. I mean, I was trying to avoid that, but at this point I want to have headers. So that header is just not going to work with that shift arm. So that's something to keep in mind if you're doing one of these. It's the shift arm, on this one anyway, is going to go away. Okay, so that only took far too long. I farted around with this thing for like an hour. Once I pulled that shifter out of there and realized that was gumming up the whole works, the header basically went right on with no problem. So I spent like an hour fabricating that shifter linkage to make it work, and then I spent another hour farting around before I figured out why this thing wouldn't fit. You know, in this business we make 120 bucks an hour. I've already got 2 hours worth of time wasted trying to get that column shifter to work. The conclusion that I've come to, guys, is just buy a dang floor shifter. It's not even worth the time you spend. So, but the nice thing is the header is in, it's tight, it fits, steering column's hooked up again. So and this is our list here, and if you take a look at the list that we started with, I've got all but maybe 1 or 2 things, maybe 3. We got to get the detent cable figured out for the transmission for the 700R4. It is way too long. I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with that. And then the throttle cable also, you can see it comes out to the front of the truck here. It is way too long also. So I'm not sure. I'll probably get like an aftermarket throttle cable, which is, the Speed Shop has those, no big deal. Yeah, so we're getting there. I am hoping we can fire this thing up tomorrow. I got both radiator hoses on, I got coolant in it, there's no leaks. I got tranny fluid in, the engine's already been, the oil pump's been primed. I've got a gauge out here on it, so I really need to fire this up. And the reason I say I need to fire it up is because at this point, after all this work, I need some inspiration. I need to hear this thing run just to motivate me some more, because I am getting really tired of working on this truck. I'm gonna finish it, right? But you know, there's all the little stuff I've had to do. It's not like I wake up in the morning and goes, I'm so excited, I get to spend 5 hours buttoning up little tiny things on this truck. So hopefully tomorrow I can introduce you to the music of my people. So until then, I am going to bed. I am so tired. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, but I got the dang headers on. So I'll see you in the next segment. So I know I said I was going to bed, but I saw the spark plug wires sitting on the shelf in a box, and they were calling to me. So listen, guys, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I got a jumper wire to the coil on the distributor. I put some fuel in it. I got all the spark plug wires hooked up. I'm gonna crank it over and see what happens. I got the truck in parked, even though I took a shifter off. So I just can't resist it. Let's see what this thing will do. I'm not sure where the timing's at. I have no idea. Oh, got flames coming out the exhaust. Jeez, we got a fire down there. Oh, it's out. It was just flames coming out the header. Okay, so I gave up last night. It's the next morning. I know I should wait to get everything 100% buttoned up to start this, but I just can't. So what I did is I hooked up my run stand fuel pump, and I filled the float bowl and the carburetor with fuel. That's enough to make it run for 2 or 3 minutes. I want to get it running long enough to drive it up on my trailer, because my plan is to take this to the muffler shop, to trailer it to the muffler shop, and have them weld the exhaust system on, and then trailer it back home. It's acting like I got a wire crossed. I think one of the spark plug wires is crossed. Okay, I had 4 and 3 mixed up. Okay, firing order's right. Uno más. Okay, fire in the hole. of gas, but I am so jazzed. Okay, so now I can be motivated to do it. We're gonna get this thing going this weekend, hopefully. That never gets old. So what I think about sometimes is like, I mean, how many people are actually in their garage during this pandemic thing putting a 300 horsepower V8 in an S10? Most people are just like sitting around like, oh, we're so lonely. When is this gonna end? It's like, come on, man, do something. I mean, you know, and also the average person out there, it's like they don't even think about their car. It's like they just, their car is just this shapeless blob painted silver, in the words of David Freiberger. And they don't even think about their car. They don't, it's just like, it's just a mode of transportation to them. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So anyway, I'm happy, and we are going to go buy a shifter. So I have this weird compulsion. I've tried to stop working on engines and vehicles so many times. It's like, man, this is so much work. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it, but I just have this compulsion. I just can't stop. You know, I'll get an old car like the Scion. I don't even want a stupid Scion, but you know, I was like, oh, it needs an engine. Let's fix it. You know, and then, oh, it needs bushings. Oh, it needs a turbo. You know, I don't know. It never gets old, man. So my advice to you is just get out there and do something. You don't necessarily have to get it right, but get it running. I've seen guys have projects go on for 3 or 4 years. Says the guy with the S10 that hasn't been, the big block S10 that hasn't been done for 2 years. The main thing is, even if you have to wire stuff up and just kind of temporarily make it work, get it running, because that's what motivates you. I mean, it never gets old. I have the same like burst of energy and excitement that I had when I built my first small block when I was, you know, 17, and I had no idea what I was doing then. So, and even though this is just a crappy 300 horsepower engine, I mean, I literally pieced this engine together with stuff laying around the shop. I mean, everything inside is new. I had a new set of pistons on the shelf that have been there for like 2 years. I had rings. The crankshaft's brand new. It's a Scat crank, 5.7 liter 350 crank, one piece rear main seal. That was new. I don't even know where that came from. I think a guy brought me 2 of them, and I did a stroker for him, and he just said keep that one or whatever. We made a deal. The rods are Scat rods, brand new in the box, that I've had laying around here forever. Never did use those. The heads, I put big stainless valves in them, and I put a roller cam in, and I put new roller lifters in. But that cam and those lifters, they're brand new. I had that stuff on the shelf. I've got so much crap that I literally pieced this engine together with parts, and they're all new, and they're pretty good performance parts. But the reality is they're Vortec heads, and they're mildly upgraded. You're really not going to see much more than 300 horsepower. But do you need more than 300 horsepower in an S10? No, you don't, says the guy who's building a 600 horsepower big block S10. But that's a whole different deal. That's not a daily driver. That's like a pro street thing that's going to be driven rarely on the street. For something like this, just a cheap get you by project with stuff that you have laying around. And I mean, you don't have to have like brand new parts on the shelf like I did. Heck, you could buy a good running 350 for 650 bucks out of something and slam it in here, you know. It didn't cost me that much. The reality is 2,500 bucks into this so far, and I still got to go buy a shifter. Okay, well, so it's Wednesday afternoon, and unfortunately I had a death in the family, and this happened last week, but I've got it running and I'm happy, but I have to go out of town for a social distancing funeral. It's just a small thing that we're having, but unfortunately my uncle passed away. So yeah, he's one of 3 brothers, my dad and his 2 brothers. My dad passed away a few years ago, and now his other brother. So he was a good man. He lived a good long life, but still I got to pay tribute to him. I love the man. So unfortunately, because of my travels out of state for that, I'm not going to be able to do much more work on this. until I get back. And then next week, I mean, I have the Roush Yates power and performance thing that I've made a commitment to, and I mean, we're going full bore into that. I have no choice. I have to, I mean, my week, probably the next 2 weeks, is just going to be slammed with all of the commitments that I have with that. So, but I mean, you won't know the difference, because I'll just, when I get back to this, I'll just tag everything on to the end of the back of this video, and it'll be like everything was done in one day. So I appreciate you watching, and I will talk to you soon. I may end this video here, I'm not sure. We'll see. It depends on how long these segments. That's another thing. I have to edit all this stuff. Man, I got like so much video to edit. So yeah, so thank you for watching. I appreciate it. If I do end this video here, you are my people. And if you're truly a hot rod enthusiast, you are my people. And I really appreciate you watching. Subscribe and like, and we got a bunch more stuff coming up. I also have to get, I have a Pontiac build that I'm like 2/3 done with for a customer, and I have to get that done. I made a commitment to him too, so that's another thing that I gotta like jump back on. So so thanks for watching, and I will see you soon, I promise.